In England, certain people really liked Calvin's ideas on religion, and they decided they wanted to follow his example and purify the Church of England by getting rid of all traces of the Catholic faith. This is the reason they started to be called Puritans. Most Puritans didn't want to leave the Church of England. Instead, they hoped that by working as church members, they could change all the things they found wrong with it, such as religious artwork, priests, and Catholic ceremonies.
The dominant group in the migration would have been families with parents in their late 20s, 30s, even early 40s. That is to say, people of some substance and maturity.
They were people who owned some property, who owned their own farm or their own shop back in England. And so we have much more of an age spectrum, from children to young adults to even old people who are going together as intact family groups. They're going with some property of their own. They're paying their own way.
The communities that do form play a dominant role in the lives of the families sheltered within their boundaries.
The regulation of marriage is a good example, not just in the United States, but in Europe, modern Western culture. We would think of marriage primarily as a decision of two individuals. This was not how these guys thought of this. It was understood that marriage, although obviously meant to provide security and companionship for people, was also a social obligation. And you had obligations to your family in marrying the appropriate kind of person. But more than anything, a marriage was supposed to be the cornerstone of a stable family, which was the cornerstone of a stable community.
They described the family as a little commonwealth. It was a microcosm of the larger society. It was not only the space in which people received sustenance and shelter, but it was also the place where people learned how to become functional adults. They learned from participating in the various hierarchical relationships within the family how to participate as citizens in hierarchical relationships outside of the family when they became adults.
To the Puritans, marriage is a contract between husband and wife, validated by a ceremony before the magistrate.
And it meant not that they were necessarily equal partners, because it was clear that the male head of household was just that, the head of household. But it also was a break from the notion that the husband's or the father's authority was absolute or all but absolute. The contractual understanding of marriage meant that male husbands and fathers had obligations and responsibilities as well as rights and prerogatives. And women, Puritan women, could call them on that. Puritans allowed for the right of divorce precisely because of this contractual understanding. And if one party or the other violated the terms of that contract, it could be dissolved, as could any contract. So this allowed for greater latitude for women. Are there lots of constraints? Sure. Is this always lived up to? No. When push comes to shove, is the man in charge? Most of the time. But it is an opening, and it's a significant way of thinking about the relationship of husbands and wives that is different and is supported by their own laws.
A great many of the Puritan leaders were men educated in Europe's leading universities. They placed great stock in education. In 1638, the Reverend John Harvard, dying at the age of 30, left half his fortune and 400 books to a fledgling college begun 2 years earlier in a small house in a cow yard. The town called it Harvard College.
As time went by, Puritanism's power got weaker and weaker. You may wonder whatever happened to the separatists and Puritans. The fact is, over the next few centuries, they changed, and their religion, that was now called Congregationalism, got a lot less strict. And it is interesting to know that many of the beautiful, white-steepled congregational churches found in New England towns today can trace their beginnings back to a time when they were separatist and Puritan meeting houses.